Andrea, for you as Vice President of the IGU, what do you feel is the best pathway for the EU and China to emerge stronger from the current challenges?
Cooperation in the spirit of the IGU is, of course, again, one top priority we have to look at. We cannot solve things on a niche basis. So just for European request or demand, or just for China, or just for Africa. Because again, the challenge that we are confronted with is the fact that we will need more energy to go to sustain development, growth, the needs of the consumers at the end of the day. So Europe and China for sure are the two largest importing markets, especially for gas going forward. Irrespective of the targets, if you allow me this blunt expression, in terms of climate change. We do consider this a very important target to be met, but at the same time, we have to be pragmatic. And pragmatism is requiring good cooperation going forward. Again, we have been, especially in Europe, been very vocal about net zero targets, but they are very demanding. And we need to have a vast array of instruments that we are not able, as we are seeing today, to deal with less instrument going forward. So we are discussing about the revival of nuclear. We are facing a revival of coal, which was totally unexpected in our projections. And indeed, we have to have gas and renewable gases be part of the scenery. I am very glad to see that very recent decisions at European level are relaxing, for instance, some very tight requirements for green hydrogen labeling. So we have to avoid to create a perfect theoretical scheme, which is unfortunately not making us reach the target. So we have, again, the need to promote all the potential instruments. And with that, gas, of course, is having a role to play.
Andrea, the revival of these technologies, nuclear, let's put that aside, revival of coal, the sustained use of gas, perhaps increased use of gas once we bring in LNG and once the current crisis is over, means that decarbonization, so through renewable gases, but also through technologies like CCUS, become extremely important. What is the reason for slow growth?
For sure in Europe. We have to be more pragmatic into including CCUS in the scenery. We have been debating this technology for too many years, and we are losing time vis-a-vis other regions in the world which are taking a more expedite path in this respect. So technology-wise, we have a proven technology. We have been debating about the fact that we should not look for blue hydrogen, therefore CCUS is not to be looked at, and so on and so forth. So I think we have a social license to be gained more, for sure. But on the policy side, I think we have to learn from this very crisis we are living in to avoid predefining the solution that will be fit for purpose in 2050. We have to, again, look at the carbon budget. And carbon budget-wise, we have to make things happen as fast as possible. So we have to rush. And again, it is very important to capitalize on the technology that European companies can develop as well. Because again, we have a challenge, so to speak, in terms of technologically frontier developments in Europe vis-a-vis, for instance, China. We are seeing that in the solar power business. And the concentration of critical materials and so on and so forth. So if we have to learn, again, from what others are doing, and rightly so, I think Europe can just play CCUS faster.
CCUS, you immediately think of price impact. The EU market, which is our pride and joy. I mean, we were there first. It's been a great success. It was how we'd managed to get prices within €1 of each other across the whole of the EU. Well, look what's happened.
Yes, because of course we are seeing the very, very big crisis we are in, the financial effects of the crunch to liquidity. But if I look back, we have been somehow complacent to the fact that we were having abundant resources, competitive resources, but we were not looking at how investments were going very much down. What I'm saying is that if we have reduced oil and gas developments by half in the last 5 years, of course, this is something that is going in cycles. And we have, of course, been absolutely astonished, and indeed are astonished by the invasion of Russia to Ukraine that has created an awful situation, especially for the people suffering. Let me be clear on that. But in terms of energy, we have a longer term issue to be dealt with. So we have to continue, again, promoting investments, both in the natural gas plus CCUS, as I mentioned, and of course, we have to, again, promote the renewable gases growth. But in that respect, we have to acknowledge the fact that renewable gases will have a long way to go before they make a significant impact. So in terms of markets and the impact to consumers, I think we have to regain a connection between producers and consumers. And indeed, when I started enjoying the pleasure of dealing with energy business, the long term was 25 years. Possibly now the long term is 12 months. So there is some sort of medium term to be regained there. Otherwise, we are not in the position to create a solid market development. We have been in Europe enjoying a lot the arrival of more LNG from the US in these very months. And of course, we were very, very proud of having this new relationship. But if I look at new contracts being signed since March this year, long-term supply contracts from the US to markets, I see China surpassing Europe by far. So we have to reduce volatility also through instruments that are trying again to regain what I call confidence between producers and consumers.
The problem is the entanglement of physical and theoretical trading. Do you see a policy opportunity here to protect consumers?
I think we have, again, not to lose the crisis we are living in order to improve things. We have been, as you said, enjoying a very well-developed energy market at large in the last 15 years at least. We have not tested the system in short supply situations. The priorities as of now are food, heat, electricity, mobility, and climate. We have to, again, reconnect the 5 elements that I just showed in a more cohesive approach, because we cannot solve one thing at a time. We have to be somehow holistic, if you allow me the expression.
It's very, very difficult for the public to understand that because of the way gas or energy companies are structured, that they can be buying at higher prices, passing on those costs. You think, well, everything stays the same for the energy supply, but it doesn't, because of course they have this separate trading opportunities. Of course, I'm talking about the price caps. Do you have any fears about this, where it might be leading?
Matthew, I've been thinking about price cap for the last, I think, 3 months at least, and discussed that with many peers, both in Italy, in Europe, and in the international space. And I have come to, let's say, resolve the fact that as of now, we have not clear, let's say, determination on how this can be workable and indeed prove effective. I think there is, of course, a very strong political attention to protecting consumers. I am somehow decoupling protecting consumers with respect to price cap somehow. Mm-hmm. Because, as you said, there is somebody buying on the market and the market will drive prices. So what if the producer is taking, and let's forget about the nitty-gritties about legal contractual relationships that are to be, let's say, restructured on top of the, let's say, political decisions. But who's buying from whom, at which conditions, and how the prices will be affecting the consumers. Are the consumers affected at the same time by the same price cap? Are they directed to priority consumers? Is this for specific suppliers or at large for any supplier? So it's really a very difficult matter, a very difficult matter. What I'm perceiving is that we can indeed, as governments are doing in many respects, the concept is trying to get a relief for consumers in terms of their energy bills. If this is a price cap or not, we can discuss.
What barriers remain to the development of renewable gases in the EU and globally?
I think we have at least two dimensions. On biomethane, we can, of course, scale up things quite rapidly, but rapidly means that we have, again, somehow more decentralized production way of putting energy into the system. So we have both smaller scale facilities with respect to the normal energy flows we are used to. So there is a number of investments that are to be sanctioned. So it's the not just the scale that of the production that we are aiming at, but the numbers of projects that are to be sanctioned. So that's one important element to be considered. And of course, in this energy crunch and price inflation scenario, it will be, of course, very difficult for players to go with a solid proposition. Again, given the fact that the European Union raised the bar of the target for 2030 is 35 billion cubic meters of biomethane, which is an awful lot of production to be put in place in 7 years. On hydrogen, we have a double challenge, I think. That is, on one side, as I said before, we have to be more pragmatic in terms of color of the molecules. Again, we have been discussing a lot which color was fit for purpose. Again, fit for purpose is something that I would like to discuss when we have the energies that we need in the system. Then, of course, the market will appreciate more one color or the other, depending on the competitive conditions, the green labeling and environmental, let's say, attributes there. But as of now, I would say that we have to really focus on all sorts of hydrogen. The additional element is importing hydrogen. Importing hydrogen from abroad is technically quite challenging. The more so requires, I think, a very strong cooperation. Let's go back to cooperation in terms of how we are collectively defining the correct labeling procedures, trackability, accountability, because of course we have to be compliant with the NDCs. And I said before, we have a collective, let's say, challenge globally. And I would say that we have to make green molecules be trackable in the right way. Because of course, if we are going to import from Saudi Arabia, from Australia, from Chile, of course, the client at the end of a path, let's assume is going to Germany, the industrial client would require to have a green labeling of that molecule. So we have to align the ways through which all these molecules will be not just physically, but also commercially recognizable as green. Be pragmatic on the possibility to create the best possible environment for solutions to happen. Then we can refine, improve, detail. But if we are trying to detail the perfect world now, it will never happen. So if we are looking at, let's stop long-term contracts by 2049, that's something that I cannot really understand. Yeah, let me go back in my personal history to share with you an anecdote. 8 years ago, when I was presenting to my board of directors some energy scenario trends, I presented the map of the world as usual with the arrows and the usual representation there. The only difference is that I put Asia at the center, which was not common for our European angle to look at in the map. Having said that, last year was the first year where LNG surpassed pipeline trade for gas. So this is something that we have, again, to acknowledge. And this has changed dramatically the way that gas flows have been, let's say, traded for all its history for now. Indeed, we are enjoying, so to speak, in these very months, the fact that China, which was the fastest growing LNG driver in terms of demand, and which was the #1 importer last year, has reduced its demand because of the COVID lockdown policies, indeed. But what if, and when, not if, in my view, these will be reversed. So we will have a rush for having secured new LNG cargoes. We have been discussing a lot in the last years on reverse flows. I recall in a very long standing emergency, I think it was 2009, there was then a regulation for developing reverse flows. We've done some. We have not done the whole thing. It should have been done. We have been discussing about the MidCat for years. Again, I could have some personal take there because as NAM, I was involved in Terega discussions with the French government and regulator, but the same applies to Central and Southeast European countries. And if I look at Franco-German flows, they are blocked by authorization issues still. So there is a lot to be done. And I think there, in European terms, we have, again, a responsibility to be thought about. That is how we have blocked the investments for infrastructures. Again, if I look at the statements of the European Investment Bank, natural gas is over. We have to park that away. We have not to finance anything about that anymore. And I think we have the need to revise these kind of statements. And we are now having a potential expansion of the Kirk LNG regas. And indeed, Germany is fast tracking the LNG regas terminals on their own. And Italy is trying to make 2 LNG FSRUs again in the system. If I recall, when we discussed the energy strategy in 2017, one of the suggestions there was to have more regasification capacity, 2017. So we have lost a lot of time. So you have to plan very much in advance. And indeed, you have to plan things that are somehow low probability, high impact for the system.
In terms of development of renewable gas production, renewable gas markets, where will that come from? Which region in the world do you think is where we should be looking? Where is it? Is it going to be the US? Is it going to be Europe, China?
We are collectively, I mean, saying that renewable gases are somehow increasing our energy independence. It will be looked at on how to best create a balance between inputs and domestic supply. So in that respect, I think there is a huge possibility for many regions to look at the so-called circular economy principles, transforming waste to energy. And there is a lot to be done there. Of course, on renewable side, on renewable electricity side, you can have excess electricity to be then producing hydrogen. But with hydrogen, we are very clear about the fact that we will need to import from other places. Again, there is a technological challenge there. but we are seeing many countries looking at their potential export roles. I mentioned before Saudi Arabia, Australia, Chile, who knows, the US. The point is how to develop demand, because there is a question about how to make demand for renewable hydrogen or hydrogen at large scalable enough and fast enough to meet the potential supplies. Because again, the challenge I see is on the business case for industrials to just switch to hydrogen and forget about the rest of the commodities they can use. So that's something that I've not personally resolved. I'm discussing with peers again in order to understand and to learn. I think, again, if I have one suggestion to look at in this dimension is stimulate innovation, and production of new facilities as fast as we can. But we cannot just wait for perfection to come and then reason on how to expand that. So we have to take care about how possibly Europe can develop technology and support other geographies to develop their own also possibility to secure energy needs. We still have to learn a lot. And sometimes it's something that we are not considering. We think we know all the answers, which is not the case. Which is not the case. We have to be humble enough to saying, let's look at how to capitalize the experience, but also verify new options. Again, we have uncharted territories to look at. Good luck with the event, and unfortunately this time I could not make it, but I hope this was good enough to have some food for thought.